Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Monday, the 17th of June in London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, France's election increasingly looks like a battle between the extremes as markets remain on edge.
Watching out for the Vigilantes, why the shadow of Liz Truss looms large over European politicians' policy pledges.
Plus, the irrepressible dollar. Bloomberg finds that a third of all capital flows have headed to the US since COVID.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
French far-right leader Marine Le Pen says she'll work with current President Emmanuel Macron if her party wins the upcoming parliamentary elections. The National Rally politician told Le Figaro newspaper that she was not calling for institutional chaos. Meanwhile, Macron's economy and finance minister Bruno Le Maire says the country is also at risk from the left-wing Popular Front alliance, which is dominated by the far-left party France Unbowed.
And so I appeal to the Social Democrats, who have less pride than François Hollande. Rejoin the centre bloc, pay attention to what's happening. This is France Unbowed, anti-Semitic, hostile to workers in the working class. This Popular Front is neither a front nor popular. It is profoundly disunited and will do harm to the French people.
Bruno Le Maire there speaking through a translator to the French radio station France Inter. Parties submitted their final lists of candidates for a deadline on Sunday after negotiations among parties to form alliances to bolster their chances in the two-round ballot. The far-right National Rally is leading in the polls, with the alliance of left-wing parties in second, ahead of President Macron's party in third.
Now, French and Swiss finance firms are more likely to have former politicians as board members than their European peers. According to a study by Ernst Young, a third of financial services companies headquartered in Switzerland and 30% of those in France have at least one board member with ministerial or parliamentary experience. In comparison, just 11% of UK firms boast the same. Former politicians are increasingly in demand on the boards of companies as businesses navigate election-fuelled political uncertainty.
In the UK, Rishi Sunak's Conservatives are headed for a wipeout in the July 4th general election, according to 3 new polls. Surveyation's survey sees the Tories getting only 72 seats, which would be their worst election performance in 2 centuries. One of the reasons for their slide in the polls has been the emergence of the right-wing Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage. The party is launching its manifesto later today. Former Tory Defence Secretary Liam Fox says voting for Reform UK is counterproductive.
The price for what they think is a protest vote would be a Labour government that would do the very things, for example, in the referendum, that they voted against. It is completely illogical.
Despite Fox's words, Reform UK overtook the Conservatives in the polls for the first time over the weekend.
The United States has mopped up almost 1/3 of all the global investment flows since COVID. Analysis by the International Monetary Fund, requested by Bloomberg News, shows that the US's share of financial flows have climbed, with high US interest rates a major draw for overseas investors. The US has also pulled in a fresh wave of foreign direct investment. That's despite all the angst over the dollar's dominance and one-off events like a shortage of dollars in 2020 that spooked global investors. But there may be challenges ahead from Fed rate policy and a divisive presidential election in November, which could affect the fiscal deficit.
China's industrial expansion slowed in May at the same time as retail sales picked up. The mixed picture suggests the country's domestic market is beginning to catch up on its export-driven recovery. The exports are likely to come under growing strain, as major partners erect new trade barriers. China's Premier Li Qiang is in Australia today talking up the benefits of their trade partnership.
We will leverage our respective strengths to expand cooperation in energy, mining, new energy vehicles, green development and digital economy. We agreed to provide each other with reciprocal access to 5-year multiple entry visas for tourism, business and visiting family members, so as to better facilitate personal exchanges.
Premier Li spoke there via translator on the first Australian visit a senior Chinese official has made since 2017.
And just lastly, England has beaten Serbia 1-0 in their first game at Euro 2024 in Germany. 20-year-old Jude Bellingham's first half header proved to be the difference between the two teams. Goalkeeper Jordan Pickford also made some crucial saves late on for Gareth Southgate's side.
Pleased that we had to show a different side, that we had to show that resilience to defend our box, because I think as a group that really builds a huge spirit.
Gareth Southgate's England team is currently top of Group C after that 1-1 draw between Denmark and Slovenia in the other group game. The Euros final is being held on the 14th of July in Berlin. Now, in a moment, we're going to discuss the interplay between the bond markets and elections in France and the UK, the very serious matter of elections, which have really upended a lot of thinking, certainly about it there being a weaker dollar this year. That seems to be the opposite of what is happening. But before we get into all of that, something perhaps lighter and quite interesting. I mean, the inflation story has been quite severe, but if you look at the cities in the world that are the most expensive places to live if you're an expat, London has leapt up the list, but Hong Kong and Singapore are now the priciest cities in the world for expats.
And it's high rents that are driving this. It's the latest report from Mercer's 2024 cost of living report. So the thing that propelled Singapore and Hong Kong over the likes of Zurich, Geneva, Basel and Bern, also traditionally quite expensive cities, is the fact that rents have gone up by so much, and that's what's been leading to this reshuffle. Inflation's such a big theme in this report this time around as well, because it means that companies that are relocating staff, which is basically what this report is aimed at, do need to be that much more conscious of the inflationary trends in the places that they're relocating people to, and that's impacting, of course, what those pay expectations are for those workers who are moving as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, maybe it's just me, but personally, the pull of the Middle East also seems to be rising, doesn't it, when you talk to people in London? So I was quite interested to see that actually Dubai in the UAE is ranked 15th. So I don't know. I mean, London's ranked 8th. It's still pretty expensive, actually, or perhaps increasingly expensive also to head to the Middle East. Anyway, you can find the list of all the 30 cities that have been tracked on the Bloomberg terminal this morning.
Well, let's turn back to some of the election news out of France over the weekend, as that campaign is heating up there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the far-right leader Marine Le Pen saying in a newspaper interview that she would work with Emmanuel Macron if her party wins the parliamentary election. Stephen, very interesting comments from Marine Le Pen, given her party is in the lead in the polls.
And this appears to be an appeal to moderate voters and also perhaps to investors as well. So Marine Le Pen speaking to Le Figaro newspaper, talking about how she's respectful of institutions and isn't calling for institutional chaos. She says she won't call for Macron to resign if her party wins, and that there will, in her words, simply be cohabitation if that happens. This is a situation where you have a prime minister from one party and a president from another. The last time it happened in France was in 1997. This coincides with the latest polling, where we're looking at the National Rally on 35% of the vote. The left-wing Popular Front, who we've just been hearing about, would come second according to this poll with 26%. Emmanuel Macron's Renaissance Party in third at 19% as well. It's worth remembering that France has a 2-round electoral system. So what actually might be interesting looking at these polling results is many of those runoff contests could actually exclude Emmanuel Macron's party altogether, and voters may in the second round be given a choice of the far right and the left-wing alliance as well. This campaign is obviously still playing out at a high tempo. We had protests over the weekend as well. Tens of thousands of people taking to the streets across France to protest against Le Pen's stance on things like human rights, the environment and the economy. That left-wing alliance looking pretty fragile already. We've seen some high-profile MPs from parties being left off the electoral lists, which were finalised on Sunday night. There's also still upheaval in the centre-right party, the Républicains as well, over their leader who'd initially promised an alliance with the far right, and then rolling back in the party, trying to oust him at the same time as well. Legal challenges underway there. This is a campaign that really is heating up now.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite incredible. Markets always find it very difficult to think about elections and to think about political risk and how voters are going to make their decisions. But I think it's just even more tense now. I mean, India was quite surprising. Mexico also, we saw surprising results in the markets. And last week, the spread between French and German bond yields widening the most on record. So actually, great deal of tension about the direction of these votes.
Well, let's bring in our Markets Live Asia team leader, Garfield Reynolds, for more on the market side of this story. Garfield, talk us through just what's been happening to French bonds since the snap election was announced. Caroline mentioned the spreads there.
Yeah, it really is all about the spreads here. If you look at the Just look at French bond yields rose 3 basis points on the 10-year last week. You wouldn't think that there was anything much going on. But that meant that they gapped 28 basis points wider or so relative to German bonds. That's the biggest jump in the spread on record in data going back to 1990. So that's an extraordinary indication of just how serious the bond market is taking this and how investors are really not sure what to make of the decision by Macron to call the snap election. The polls that are showing his party will do very poorly. You were outlining, took you quite a while to outline the potential that what might go on with French elections. So investors are going to be watching a lot of that, and a lot of them look like they want to be on the sidelines while they wait to see what comes out, because the moment they've got to feel like the best case scenario is that Macron ends up retaining some level of control, but he will have lost a lot of credibility and lost a lot of traction. Even when Le Pen is talking about cohabitation, the question is going to be who gets to have the greatest say on where things go. So you've got a lot of concern about that in the bond market. You're going to go on at least having a wide spread to German yields. You've got France at the moment trading as though it is Spain or Portugal, which was something you wouldn't have thought you would have seen some time back, given those those economies' histories. You also have the CDS for France gapping wider as well. It jumped by the most since March 2020 when the pandemic was going on, and it's now very close to going above the CDS for the US. So maybe investors are worried you're going to see lots of government spending and political gridlock in France, which is very much the expectation for the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. So then what do you think investors are watching out for in particular from the parties? Probably more detail, surely.
Yeah, I mean, more detail, I think more than anything else, a sign that they're willing to compromise, to pursue something close to politics as usual. I mean, any manifesto promises that they might make, you have to take, with a grain of salt, because your politics has shown you're never quite sure what people will do once they're actually in power versus what they say they will do once they're in power. And a lot of that depends on, what the outcomes are. You look at Mexico, just recently, where the election went mostly as expected. It's just that Schleimbaum ended up doing too well, so well that investors there found it difficult to trust that she would carry out measured policies in the way that they would like to see. So I think in a lot of ways it's going to be the way they talk rather than what they actually say that investors will pay most attention to.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.